to start this again because it keeps on crashing. Yes, so like I said, I have a Notion roadmap already prepared. So I've completed day 2 to day 7, and I'm going to walk you through what they each do, right? So the day 2 was centered around Docker infrastructure, and that reminds me that I've not yet explained the architectures for the backend. I know I said for the standard service I plan on using DDD. So the backend is just it's a monorepo, but it's a special monorepo in the sense that it's each domain, or in this case for Django, each folder, each app folder, or each application has their own function. So this allows everything to be well structured instead of having every single thing you're doing inside the one views.py file, services file. So this allows it to be more structured, and it has a name. It's called monolithic modular Django architecture, if I'm not wrong, right? So it's not a microservice because if it's a microservice, everything would run on different services. So it's still a monolith, but it's a mono repo, right? Which is isolated folders or domains that each have their own specific function. For example, the accounts folder contains the details about user login, register, logout, or the profile even. So then we also have analytics for its own function, the social, the style advisor, the trip planner, and the wardrobe, right? Now that's the apps. Then we have the common folder. So the common folder is just what it holds, like generic utilities like created arts. Let me say created art, updated art, things that you would see in almost every um use the py file here. So instead of having to repeatedly write it over and over again, we can just have it here and then import it there. Then we also have the config. So the common folder just shares the things that we use commonly in the apps folder with the apps folder just by importing, right? Now this is the config file folder. So it's the big brains behind the project, right? It contains the Django configuration, like the settings.py file, contains the urls.py for containing each or mapping each of the applications URL. As you see here, we only have the account and wardrobe shown here. It also has that's basically the two important things in this config folder. Then we have the manage.py that allows you to if you know how to run Django, you know that you run something like Python run server 8000. Let me show you it here. The Python manage.py run server. So the manage.py file is the one that controls that stuff. It's the command center of the Django project. This is where you run the server, where you make migrations, where you migrate, where you create a super user or admin, where you run the test file. So it just controls the 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 things in the Django project. So that's the apps folder, common folder, config, and the Docker file. The virtual env or virtual environment is just a folder that is made when you run like pip install. So this is it contains all the things you installed from the requirements.txt file. Okay. So now let's take a look at the Docker file, and the Docker compose or YAML file. Like people tend to confuse the functions of these two, but it's actually pretty simple to understand. Let me rearrange this. Let's start with the Docker file that is in the backend. right? So, so the Docker file basically just tells uh, Docker it describes how to build an image for your application. So if we're to translate this to simple English, what it means is that get Python, which is this line, create a folder slash app in the container, the Docker container, install the system dependencies, install the Python dependencies from the requirements, the text file I just showed you here, then copy the backend code. So copy everything that is inside this backend into this folder that was created in the container, right? Then export or expose, sorry, the 8,000 ports to it. So making this port accessible. So when we run this, it's going to run on localhost 8,000. So this is running the Django. This is the command. So that's what this folder, this asset folder, sorry, file does. Now the Docker Compose is what runs the whole development environment. So this one just gives instructions as to how the uh, backend service is going to be run, right? But Docker Compose runs the whole development environment. So it actually starts it up. It runs in this Docker Compose. You can write all the services in your project and run it all at once instead of having to open several terminals for each service. So here we can define how the backend is to be run, the front end, the job worker, the styling service. So I actually have that here, but they're commented out because I don't have a Docker file in each of them, and my primary focus for week 1 and 2 is the backend. But later on we'll comment it and then I'll explain it. So we have the Redis service running. This is the image it's using, the container it's using, right? Redis 7 Alpine. Then the name of our container, the port that's exposed to, the health check, like if you want to test whether Redis is up and running. Then the backend service, this side, this 2 lines or 3 lines rather, says build my backend using the Docker file in the backend folder, right? Do you understand? And this is the command that should run. So the port, this is where this port, this is my computer 8,000 port, then run this port too in the container on 8,000. So when we want to access it, we're going to get localhost 8,000, right? And here for Redis, it's going to be 6379. So the volumes, this is yes here. So basically what it does is that if you change a file, let me say inside the apps folder, or you're not even in the apps folder, even if it's in the common folder, if you change a file there, it's automatically going to restart the Docker by itself instead of you having to close the running Docker instance and then run it all over again. So it's going to do that automatically. It's going to detect the change and then apply the change, right? So it just connects your local backend, like connects whatever changes are going to be made here to the slash app folder. Remember this directory folder here in the container. So they're going to be connected. Whatever change occurs here will be triggered in the apps directory, and then once that happens, your changes will show in real time. So the environment variable, the environment file, this just holds the environment variables. So it loads it there. So yes, so depends on. So basically, the backend service depends on whether the Redis is running. Do you get that? So basically, the first service that will be started is Redis. Then we hit the health check. So Redis will tell you Pong, right? This is the test. Then if Redis is healthy, we proceed to the backend service and then start the Django backend. So that is basically the Docker file and the Docker compose. So now we're going to move on to our next task. So we've done this. Now we want to run Docker. And remember, before you can run Docker, before you can have it all nice, all running, you have to ensure that your Docker desktop is running. So this was what it was running. It was running yesterday, but you can see it's no longer running. It has stopped, right? So the next step now is to run Docker. So let me show you the environment, the PNG file, sorry. So you don't actually need all of this. You only need this if you're running your Postgres locally. But this is what I'm using, right? Because I'm using Neon Postgres. This is the Redis URL, the Django secret key, debug and allowed root, the styling service, the job worker, the AI API keys, and all. So now let's actually run it. I mean, run Docker. Now this is what I would have run if this was my very first time running um starting this project, sorry. Because I would first have to install all the dependencies like you saw in the Docker file. But this is not my first time, so I'm just going to run Docker compose up. So I'm going to wait for that to start and end. So we have the Docker running. See, this is some of the things Redis told us, and you see here that Redis is healthy. So now the backend has started. So it's watching for any file changes so that it will reload automatically. Do you understand? So now we have completed day 2 and we're going to move on to day 3 now, which is the Django setup plus the authentication. So I don't need to do these because it's already running on the Django. Sorry, not Django, it's already running on Docker. So if I were to visit localhost 8000, it's going to work, right? So we're just going to skip these two and we're going to move to settings.py because when you first install, but I'm skipping this because when you run the Docker, remember it's going to install all the things in the requirements file. So all of that has been installed already. So if I go to the settings.py, you have to customize it, right? So that um, it's going to have all the things you need. So I'm going to show you the settings.py file now. So it's going to be in the config folder. Yeah, so the settings.py. So this is the settings.py file. So we load the .env. We're going to have coordinator.config here. We're going to have the secret key. So it's going to first get this in the .env file, right? Or if it's not there, this is what it's going to use instead. Now the installed apps. So we're going to have REST framework, the SimpleJWT, you can see it's third party applications. Cloudinary calls headers, token blacklist for logging out in SimpleJWT. And the local domain apps, these are the ones inside this folder. So apps.account, apps.wardrobe, apps.trip planner. If this was not apps in your own side, maybe you rename this, maybe it's like working, whatever, it's going to be working.accounts instead. So these are the local domain apps. So this is the custom user model we're going to use, right? I would include the link for customizing JRF authentication, right? So you understand why we have this now. This is the middleware, this is the calls headers, uh, the templates. Now the databases, I'm going to block this because I have some. Do I? Okay, no, I don't. So yeah. So this is where the data is going to be stored in. So like before, it's going to get the database URL in the .env file. But if that doesn't exist, it's going to use a local SQLite database. Okay, that's the databases. Those are the databases. This is the what we're going to use for authentication. We're not going to use session or tokens. We're going to use JWT. And this is the configuration for SimpleJWT. The access token lifetime is for an hour. Refresh token is for 7 days. Alter data type bearer, rotate refresh tokens true. So this is the cause, right? This is the Redis URL. This is the some other stuff. This is the settings of Python. Now the next thing is to create a user model, and you see here we need to do this now to find any other model, because changing it later is going to be very painful. And let me actually show you something. So this is the custom, this is the docs on the custom auth page. This is Django. I was trying to visit the DRF. It's a bit, I think it's down on my end, so using this, and this already explains it. So basically, there are two ways you can go about it. Either you have two choices. The first one, extend the existing user model. The second one is to substitute a custom user model. And if you remember, in my settings.py file, I have a sit down here. No, apologies. Yes, so here I have a custom user model, and mine is called user. It's simple as before. So if we head over to accounts and then models.py, let me just minimize this a bit. You see here, this is the user. Right. Yeah, so let's go back to the doc. So for them, theirs is called my user model. So that would mean this is not user, it's my user. Okay. So basically what you do is that you're going to inherit from this basic, let me see, could I say syntax? I don't want to call it syntax. Yeah, this is like it already has like some basic things. Let me say syntax. Would I say syntax? It's already pre-built, right? It already has some things. So this abstract user here already has things like username, password, first name, last name. So it's already populated with some details already. It's not empty. So you're just going to build on top of this for your own custom user model, right? So let's go back. So you would first do something like this: class user and then your abstract user, right? And you must not forget to add this in your settings, if not, it's not going to work. And you must also do this before creating any migrations or running manage.py migrate, because if you do that, it's going to be very difficult for you to go back and use a custom user. So to avoid that stress, you're just going to have to make sure that you customize it first before you start running any migrations. So let me go back to my code. You can visit this site. This is it here, to learn more about it. Yes. So basically, like I said, if we retract a bit, you see that the abstract user gives you like some pre-built fields, right? So instead of creating it from scratch, you're just going to have the user functionality, but then you customize it, remove the things you don't want, add the things you want, right? Okay. So this is the model. This is Django's models. You're just importing the Django models. Then this is common.models. So this one, the timestamped model, you can see it's in the common folder, right? So I'm going to come in here and then let me open it for you to see. Let me just minimize this. Okay. So we imported this there. So it imports a reusable model. So this line here just imports a reusable model from here. So it's going to give each user an ID created at and updated at without having to rewrite it here, because we're going to import it in quite a couple of places. So we'll go into more details about this later. So now we're going to have our class user, and it's built, or it inherits rather, this class user inherits from the abstract user that Django gave us and the time-stamped model that we have in our common model supply. So the user is going to get some things from the abstract user, which is like the Django built in model abstract user. So we're going to get stuff like username, password, email, first name, last name, and some other things. But for the timestamped model, the things it's going to inherit from it is the UUID ID. You can see we're using models.uuid field. So instead of using just like a simple primary key, we're going to have like instead of having like a simple primary key value, as in each ID just like ID1, ID2, ID3, ID equals 4. So we're going to have like something more complex using the UUID. And the reason why I chose to do this is so that we're going to have a lot of many-to-many fields. So we don't want to get confused as to, oh, this ID is 1 here, and in another model it's 1 as well. So instead of having that confusion, we just want to have something that make sure that they do not like mix up. So we're using UID for that. And then it's also going to inherit the created arts and updated arts field. Okay, so this is just like basic multiple inheritance in Python. Now we're going to have three fields: the email, bio, and avatar URL. So avatar URL is going to be URL field. Bio is going to be a text field. Email field is going to be the email is going to be an email field. So it's going to be unique. So you can't have two users having the same email, right? Right. So now the next thing we're going to have here. Next one we have is the username field is going to become email, and then the required field is going to be username. So this username field is important because it helps you to identify or log in users. Or if you read this comment, you see I said use email for login instead of username. So if you want to build in a custom auth, if you're just using Django's built-in auth, before you can log in, you're going to have to use username instead of email. But I want email to be the one to be used for logging in users, not username, right? So the login becomes email and password required instead of username and password required. So this required field is already self-explanatory. I want each user that wants to register to have a username by force. Okay. So just because I'm saying I want to use email for login in doesn't mean I want username to disappear. So this string function basically is just saying that okay, I need something I can read, right? So whenever if I call this, I want to return the email of the user or username. Instead of bringing it out as, let me say, an object, right? I'm going to read this like a normal human being would by getting it to return the email of the user or the username of the user, whichever one exists. Now the next file we're going to look at, because as you can see, we're connecting everything inside the account. So we looked at the models.py file. We're going to look at serializers.py file. So I'm going to scroll up. Yes. So these are just typing utilities. If you've used TypeScript before, you know that you have to specify the type of the whatever it is you are doing in the TypeScript. So we still have that something similar to in Python. So and the next import here, we're just importing Django's serializer, and here we're importing the serializer used by SimpleJWT. We're using JWT for authentication here. So it's going to provide us with an access token and a refresh token. So here we're importing So this line just imports the user model from here. Okay, no, not from there. From here. That's what it does. Back to serializers farm. So now the next thing is the classes. So this serializer here is going to convert the user model into JSON. Remember, that's a function of serializers. And go to the docs to read more on that, but I wouldn't be going into detail of this. So so this serializer converts the user model into JSON for the computer to read. So then the class method is just like what you use to configure a serializer class. So the model is the user, then the fields are all these fields that we created in the models.py file. Then the read-only fields are going to be the ID created at an update. So you cannot like edit them. You can only read them. Next is the register serializer. So this one, you're going to have the password. So this one is only registering, is only handles registration. This one handles the user profile data. So normally, let me use another. This is a project I built about 2 years ago. Yes, so you can see here I have everything in the same folder, nothing segmented. So category, product, user, account, everything was in the same folder. No segmentation. So here you can see for the user serializer, I just used this. So whenever I wanted to do like if we go into the views.py, you see the registering of a user, logging in of a user, everything was done with the same serializer. But I chose to segment it to make it much cleaner so that we won't expose things into the user profile data. The user profile should just have things containing the user profile. The register serializer should have things for registering a new user. So here, the character field, this password field, it's write only, so you cannot read it. The minimum length for password is 8. Then the password confirm, obviously you are going to type the password again, so it's also only write only, right? So you can send the write only, like I said, you can only write to it, you cannot read the details of it. Okay, so now the validate function we have here. So this is going to run validation on the entire input. So it's going to handle the validation, right? So it's going to compare the things in the password field and the password confirm. So if they do not equate, if they're not equal, you're going to get this error. But if they do, we're going to return the attributes as in the password and the password confirm. Okay, so continue, that's what it means. Now the next function is the create function. So this one is very important. So here it tells the DRF what to do after the validation succeeds. So basically after it passes this and it moves to this function, what should it do? So it's going to remove the password confirm from the data because we don't want to save the password confirm. It's just there to validate, right? We just need the password out of it. So now the next thing is return user the objects of create user. And normally, let me see if I can get it here. So in this old project of mine, I hashed the password by doing set password, the password that was inputted. But if you weren't doing it that way, you would just do user.object.create without this. Let me just delete that just to demonstrate. So doing this, the password is not going to be hashed, right? You are just going to have if you entered password 123, you're going to get password 123 in the database. But we don't want that. We want the password hashed. So that is why we're using password user.object.create underscore user. So that is what that function does. So it creates the new user and loads it into the database. Now the next thing here is the custom token obtained per serializer. So it takes the Django's SimpleJWT normal login and then customizing it. Normally, when you log in using the SimpleJWT, you're going to get refresh token, and you're going to get the access token. But we also want to add something more. We want to add the data. Oh, sorry, the user, right? We want to add the user details to whatever it is that will be returned. So we want to get the refresh token, the access token as the user. So the validate function, we're going to have, so this super validate attributes, this basically what it does is going to run simple JWT's validation. So it's the simple JWT is going to handle three questions. Does the user exist? Is the password correct? Should tokens be generated? Then this line here adds extra information, which is our user data that we wanted to return. So when you log in, what you will get is you will get the access token, refresh token, and then like user details. Let me see if I have it in my post on here. So I didn't already have one before, but let me just run this. Right. I haven't showed you the views.py yet, but I just want to explain properly what I meant by when you log in or when you register, you're going to get the refresh token, access token, and also the user details, right? So sending the request, and remember you can only run this post if your Docker is up and running. So you can see here we have user ID, the username, the email, the bio, avatar URL is null. And the reason why it's null, I didn't include it here, but the default, let me see if I can. Let's go back to models.py. If you go up a bit, see avatar URL, you see here it says null equals true. So even if you did not include it, you can have a null value, and so it won't return an error. So let's go back to the first one. So next, for the token side, you see refresh access, and okay, when we log in, we would see the user details. So this is like registering, right? When we log in, we'll see the user details. So I just wanted to show you that. Let me try and log in. Oh, I can't log in without showing you the views.py file. So I believe that's all for the serializers.py file. Let's go to views.py now. This is where all the actual HTTP request handling occurs. This is where you write your API. So like before, we're importing something for like type safety. So I'm importing this for a readable HTTP status is like your 401, 402, sorry, 403, 500, 200, all of that. Then this one is for class-based views, API view. You can also have function-based, but I'm using API view for this one. These are inbuilt permissions by Django. It's authenticated, allow any. So allow any is for like anyone can access this endpoint without having like a token, or yes, like a token. So each authenticated will only allow, like, you are only allowed to visit these endpoints if you are logged in. This is refresh token. So this is used to create and manipulate CWT refresh token. And yes. So, and let's look at the first endpoint we have. This is class health check view. So this one is just to like check if the endpoint, if the backend is live, right? Just like a health check, like it says. So the permission classes it has is allow any, so anyone can access this. So no login is required here. Then it's just going to return a text like status okay, and the status it's going to be given is 200. Yeah, it's good. That's it. So next we have the register view. So that one is going to handle the registration. So for this one, anyone can access it because obviously you can't be logged in and trying to register again. What if it's a completely new user that's not logged in? You cannot like block them from having access to it. So you don't need an account to create an account. That's basically what it's saying. So the next, the post function. So this one is going to create posts to this endpoint, registrar endpoint, because we are going to create something. We're not fetching details. We're going to create something. So this line here basically takes the JSON that was sent by the front end, whatever it is you imputed here, like these fields that you filled, it's going to give it to the serializer, and next we're going to check if the serializer is valid, if it's going to do the validation, right? This stuff here. Yes, so it's going to run this function. So it's going to do the password confirmation check. Then this one here saves the user, going to create the user. It's going to trigger the create method here, right? So all of these are like inbuilt functions for a serializer class, or while tweaking it rather, to do some of the things we want it to actually do, like the hashing, for example. But for this one, doing the comparison between the password and the password confirm. You can check all of this in their docs page. Okay. Now, the next, after it creates the user now, we want to get the refresh token for this. I'm going to create a refresh token. So it's going to create a JWT refresh token for the user. So now, what is it going to return? It's going to return user and then the tokens. That's why you can see when we run this, we got this kind of structure: user, then the tokens, then refresh and access. That's that. Next is login. So you can say just 2 lines of code for login. So for the login view, we're just going to have the serializer class here, which is custom token obtained by serializer. So instead of writing the login off manually, we're just going to use SimpleJWT's login view, but with our new, with our tweaks that we added to it. So it's going to return the user and the refresh and access token. Okay. And see, we have 3 classes: custom token obtained per serializer. If we can just say this is the login serializer, this is the register serializer. So the logout view now, so it's going to blacklist the refresh token. So before you can access this endpoint, well, we have to be authenticated. I mean, we cannot be a new user and want to log out. That doesn't make any sense, right? So that's why we have to be authenticated. So the refresh token, we're going to get the refresh token, and if there's no refresh token, we're going to return an error, because why is there no refresh token? Now if there is a refresh token, we're going to blacklist it, right? And we're going to refresh, we're going to turn the raw JWT, right? So this function here, we're going to convert our refresh token from the raw JWT to simple JWT refresh token. So basically something to we're going to convert it into something that the simple JWT understands. Then we're going to blacklist it. So if we simply, the reason why we're blacklisting it is because if we simply delete it, it's not going to be enough. So if we use the blacklist function instead, it means that this refresh token must not be accepted anymore. Now, the next thing we have is the user profile view. You must be authenticated to view this. The get endpoint, or the get API, is going to return the current user and convert the user to the user model, right, to JSON. Because when you get this, you're going to get like the structure is going to be in the user model format, but we want it to be something readable like JSON. So it's going to JSON. So it's going to convert it to JSON, then return it as here serializer.data. Then the patch, which is for like if you want to enable partial profile updates, it's not update completely. It's just like you just want to change some things in the profile. So if I want to edit just maybe just the bio field, I can do that by hitting this endpoint. So that's why partial is equal to true. That's what it means. You don't need to like edit every single field, right? I can just say, okay, this is just what I want to edit and leave the remaining ones like that. So that's what partial true means. Yes. So we've looked at the models.py, the serializer.py, and the views.py file. Now let's look at the urls.py. Uh, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we're going to import token refresh view. So this is like the from the SimpleJWT views, right? So it's going to get SimpleJWT's built-in token refresh endpoint, right? So we imported the serializer, the token refresh serializer from SimpleJWT. Now we're doing the same for the view. So this is just going to import the views that we just created, right? Now this is going to define the routes. So if we head over to health, this is going to return the health check view. We'll go to register, it's going to call register view, and just like that. But these aren't full URLs yet, because if you look at my postman here, you see that I had to hit API/auth then /register. And that is because this is just the accounts folder, this is just the application folder. The actual control center is in the config. So in here we have to configure the URL pattern here too. So API/auth and then the account URLs. Wardrobe slash sorry, API/wardrobe. These are the wardrobe URLs. Next we have the test for accounts here. Let's scroll up. Let's take a look at this class. I've explained everything, so I won't go into details on that.